I wish. It's just, it's my desire that I could be in the Vrindavan Dham like atmosphere, but I need to qualify myself for that. So, Prabhuji, I first heard of you through Mathura Prabhu, who's always raving about you. He's your number one fan. And I've listened to some of your
I
recitations.
wish. It's just,
Whoops, excuse me, there's some kind of feedback going on.
it's my desire.
Okay, fine. Yeah, so I've often wondered, gee, who is this Prabhu? He's gone deep into the Bengali Vaishnav culture. He loves to create poetry based on Bhagavad Gita and Chaitanya Leela. He loves to sing Bengali bhajans. I need to get infected by this Prabhu. That's what I was thinking. you
Well,
even, you
Matura,
even, huh?
yeah. I was just going to say Matura probably overstates the thing. You know, I'm not, I'm not that inspiring, but he's very kind. But
So
I was in ISKCON
yes, I wanted to
in
know
my,
when did you first meet the devotees? What year was that? And you remember who you met?
yeah, it was 1983
Okay,
in London, England,
Harinam.
and well, yeah, no, with some friends of mine. I was squatting. I was living in a squat. I was 21, and the other people in the squat, they kept going to the manor to visit, and they
Okay,
dragged me along one day. I didn't fancy it, to be honest with you, but and I was impressed. One of the first devotees that spoke to me was Jumna Swami.
yes, I know him well. Yep.
He was a very charismatic preacher at that time, and Keshi Shatru, who was
Yes,
a black body devotee who always wore a turban.
he was our
So he's,
Rasgula maker, kirtan leader, and pujari in the Montreal temple in the late '70s, early '80s. Yeah,
okay. Well, I thought he was really cool.
From Grenada Island, from Grenada. Yeah,
He's from Granada. Okay,
yeah.
yeah. Right. Well, and so anyway, I stayed in ISKCON from '83. I joined pretty much straight away. I didn't have much else going on for me in life,
So
and
how did you manage to overcome? Because you said initially you didn't feel it was for you.
just as soon as I got there, I
Oh,
felt at home. Yeah.
okay.
I had preconceived ideas. I had the idea that there would be monks eating porridge out of wooden bowls. And I just thought, that's not for me. And then they came with the prasad, the Mahaprasad, and they're just stuffing us with Mahaprasad. And at that time, in early 80s, they were really keen on getting new members. So when I was on the Bhakta program, there was about 20 other Bhaktas.
Yes, I remember visiting Krum Court around 1980, and I was following the Bhakti program format to do the same thing in Eastern Canada. Rohini Nandan, Vipramukhya
Yeah,
Swami,
yeah,
and Donavir. They were the triumphant trio. They're the three musketeers of
right,
ISKCON.
right. Well, Rohini Nandan is a very good friend of mine. I don't see that much of him, but he's a good friend, Rohini Nandan. But anyway, as you know, Bhagawan Das was the zonal acharya
Correct.
at that time.
After Jayatirtha.
Yeah, I just missed Jaitirtha by about 6 months.
Uh huh.
He had already gone. And so Bhagawan was established as the zonal acharya. And if you joined the temple, it was automatic. There was no question. You joined, you were there for a year. You first got your name. And then if you managed to stick it out another year, you got your sacred thread. So, yeah, I went through all that. And then he did everybody a favor, Bhagwan Das, by leaving, you know. And he certainly did me a favor because I didn't really like him. I was only sort of going along with it. And
Mm-hmm.
there was a few people like that. I mean, not that I didn't dislike him, but I just didn't see him as this authority figure. So I
Mm-hmm.
wanted it. So anyway, he left in '86, I think it was, and that was quite a relief. There was a lot of confusion at the time with the devotees, because they'd put him on such a pedestal. When he fell off it, they didn't know what to do. So luckily, I had already met Bhakti Charu Maharaj, and I was quite friendly with him. And I started to pick up the Bengali, the bhajans and the songs. I got really keen on that. And so it just went from strength to strength, learning the bhajans and learning the Bengali. And then I did a really controversial move in '87. One of Prabhupada's godbrothers, a younger godbrother of Srila Prabhupada, came over to England for a visit. Janmastami, he went to the manor, gave a talk there, and they had their own centre in northwest London, quite near Soho Street. So they were staying there, so I went there, and I thought, well, there's no gurus in ISKCON that seem up for it. I thought maybe Gaura Govinda Maharaj. I was tending towards him. But when I met Bhakti Sri Rup Maharaj, then I thought, well, this is really a fortune for me because now I can have this connection with one of Prabhupada's godbrothers, or a direct disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, with the whole institution and everything going on. So I did that, and then they kicked me out of the manor, kicked me out while I was in Soho Street. So I went and stayed in the Gaudiya Mutt for about a month. Couldn't handle it because it was too austere. Actually, if you actually try to live on your own, the only Westerner in the Gaudiya Mutt, it's really austere. They really do expect you to chant and go to all the programs every day, Mongol Arti, midday Arti, evening Arti. You've got to be there for all of it. So I found it a bit stressful. So I kind of went back to the manor and sort of crept in. I had to, make all sorts of agreements. I wouldn't say things and stuff like that. So I managed to stick that out for a while, and then eventually got hooked up with a brahmacharini, and we left the institution. I became a bus driver, but I kept my contact with the Gaudiya Mutt. I was going there almost every day until the mid '90s. Then Bhagwat Maharaj passed away, and I sort of drifted away from the institution. But with what I got in all that time, I managed to maintain my interest in reading Srimad Bhagavatam and all that stuff. So I'm not really all that good when it comes to these kind of things that you're discussing on Facebook right now, because I'm an outsider. So I can say off the cuff things because it doesn't really affect me anyway. So I don't really have much right to say much.
I understand.
Mm.
Yeah. So I got a few questions. Go on. Sorry.
No, that was it. That was a brief survey, pretty much.
Okay. Yeah. So a few questions. Um, you know, I remember either it was Srila Prabhupada. There's a little bit of hissing in the background there. I don't know if I've never heard it on my side before. I don't know if.
It may be, but if it is, there's nothing I can do about it right now. But I'll come back. I'll get rid of it. It will take a little while to go away.
Maybe you've got some strong winds coming off the Thames.
No, it's my boiler.
Oh, okay.
It's my central heating boiler. So
I see.
I turned,
Okay.
I turned it down, but it'll make a noise for a little while still before it
Okay,
cuts out.
that's fine. Yeah, so
I can hear you.
so I don't know if it was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur or Srila Prabhupada that said that one day Westerners will learn to speak or to read Bengali just to relish the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and that
Yes.
stuck with me. And so at the University of Toronto, at St. Michael's College, Professor Joseph O'Connell used to teach there, and he met Srila Prabhupada in Toronto. and he had some, famous talks with him. He also invited me to come and speak to his students about Lord Chaitanya. But I remember at that time, I had never read the Chaitanya Bhagavat. Even now, I've only read a couple of volumes of it. But I was like quite, would the word be incredulous? I'm not sure if that's the proper use of the term, but quite amazed at, how he could go on about Chaitanya Leela from Chaitanya Bhagavat. And, I mean, I don't know how many Vaishnava principles he followed, but he definitely had an attraction. I believe he spent a little time with Ban Maharaj also when he came to visit. But anyway, I mentioned to him this quote that, that either Srila Prabhupada or Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said that in the future, and I said, I would like to learn Bengali. And he gave me, I don't know if I can see it here on my bookshelf or not. I'd have to dig a bit. But a big, thick book on learning Bengali, which I'm ashamed to say I've not been able to quiet my mind enough to deeply study. I think it would be much easier if I had a Bengali pal that I could, and there's YouTubes now, I guess. But it fascinated me. It wasn't until many years later that it occurred to me that the reason that statement was made is because, and you can attest to this, that by learning the Bengali, then you start relishing Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavat on another level that may not be accessible to us who only know the English. What do you think about that thought?
Um, I think there's something to that, but I also think um, one of the reasons for that is because the translations are never in poetry.
Oh, I see. And so you're
I think
saying,
often,
yes?
I think often the time is the reason that it's not coming across the same is because it's not in poetry, whereas the
Uh-huh.
original is.
So
So
there's a
it's
flow
sung,
to it, a flow to it.
yeah, and a rhythm.
Uh-huh.
And if you don't get the rhythm, well, you don't get the rhythm. You don't get it. There's a rhythm in the original which you lose. That's one of my main motives for putting it into, rhyming couplets, all this stuff. Because I can't, once you learn the Bengali and you can read the Bengali couplets, you want to get as close to that as you can
Uh-huh. And so you've done
and
this
try
for,
and get.
sorry, excuse me.
No, go on.
You've done this for Chaitanya Bhagavat?
No, some of it, some
Okay.
of it,
Bhagavad Gita.
yeah.
And what else?
Bhagavad Gita. Well, I've done the first 47 chapters of the 10th canto.
Oh, wow.
That's my that's my big thing. I want to do the whole thing, but up to 47 is the Uddhava's visit to Brindavan. So I've got
Wonderful.
up to there. Yeah, so it's pretty great, fun. I'm reading that on YouTube. I
Yes, no,
just
I noticed.
yesterday I just
Yes.
you've seen it, right? I've read the whole 5 chapters of the Rasa Leela yesterday. I posted that. That was good fun. And the Gopi Gita, the one in the middle.
Yes.
I sung the shlokas. I sang the shlokas as well. Jayati Tedi comes.
Can you, what would you like to recite a couple right now?
Nah.
Okay.
But what about you then? How did you get involved? You Prabhupada's disciple.
Oh, very interesting. You're turning the tables on me. It's the first time anybody ever did that.
You don't look old. You don't look old enough to be Prabhupada's disciple.
uh, Looks can be deceiving.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. I was 21 years old. Let's see, 1975 would make me 21 years old. I had
Right.
listened to, I was 12 years old when I heard your mate from Liverpool there, George, singing, "We were talking about the space between us all and the people who hide themselves behind a wall of illusion, never see the truth, then they pass away, then it's far too late. Dun, 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 dun. And so I'd gone to see Hard Day's Night. I saw them when they appeared on Ed Sullivan in 1964. I didn't realize I was signing up for the Magical Mystery Tour. And then 3 years later, I heard John singing this very unusual song, Elementary Penguin, singing Hare Krishna. Boy, you should have seen them kicking Edgar Allan Poe. And I'm like, what? An elementary penguin singing Hare Krishna? What's Hare Krishna? I looked up in my Encyclopedia Britannica. Krishna, the Hindu god of love, the god of the forest. And I thought,
Right.
how enchanting, how attractive. The god of the
Right.
forest.
Were you brought up with any religion? Did you have any
Yeah,
religion before?
yeah. I'm. My body was born in. Uh, I I call it Winterpeg Manitoba. It's actually Winnipeg, Manitoba, in the center of Canada. My
Yeah.
grandparents escaped from the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 when their parents were murdered by the Bolsheviks. So they came from Kiev, where history is
Right.
repeating itself, and came to Canada to start a new life on the boat. And
Right.
so I grew
I
up there as a
suppose
young
you did.
lad. Sorry?
Mhm. I
And,
suppose like many people did that.
yeah. And Um, Dad died when I was 5, so my mom ended up moving us to a Jewish neighborhood, and I was the only non-Jewish boy in an all-Jewish school. So every morning I would sing with them, Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Venus Maha,
That's really
and
unusual.
huh?
That's so unusual, isn't it? What an
Yeah.
unusual school.
And,
My
and
God.
and on top of that, they elected me as president of the school, and I was the only one that wasn't a Jew.
Right. Well,
So
they
I,
probably, you know what they call you a pious Gentile.
well,
That's what.
my
That's
godbrother,
what.
my godbrother Satyaraj Prabhu said he was making me an honorary Jew. So
Oh, there you go.
anyway, as life goes on, I remember, in '68, was it '68 or May '69? I think John and Yoko came to the Queen Elizabeth Hotel because John was banned from America due to his, I don't know, because the government hadn't figured out how to make money by selling pot yet, so it was still illegal.
Right.
So
Right.
he came into Canada, and he did his bed in, which he already had done in Amsterdam. War is over if you want it. Everybody's talking about John and Yoko, Timmy Leary, Norman Mailer, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And like, wow, there it is again. It's popping up in these songs. And I thought, Hare Krishna must be significant. If the Beatles keep mentioning Hare Krishna and they're the gods of the counterculture, I mean, I was buying everything on the Apple label at that time, whether it was Jackie Lomax, Doris Troy, the Ivies, who became Badfinger, the Modern Jazz Quartet, um, Mary Hopkins, you name it. If the Beatles produced it, I had to get it. And amongst all those records, the Radha Krishna Temple album was one of the Apple record productions. I couldn't find that
Right.
in Canada, but when I went with my mom to visit my sister in Minneapolis, St. Paul, over the border in America, I found the Radha Krishna Temple album in a delete bin for 25 cents or something. I'm like, yay! I got a rare Apple find. But and at that time, or shortly after, I wanted to be a recording engineer. I grew up in a family. My sister had grade 9 Toronto Conservatory. My mom played the piano for the church. My grandpa was the choir master or dyak at our Olga Vladimir Cathedral. So there was always some music going on in at home. I think I had too much ADD or ADHD to play the dots because at 6 years old I was given a little classical piano training, but I just had a hard time to focus on those dots. Learned Ode to Joy by Beethoven and a little Haydn and Handel. But anyway, fast forwarding. So I was singing in a boys' choir. Do you ken John Peel at the break of day? Do you ken John Peel when he's far, far away? Do you ken John Peel? And
John Peel. I know that one.
so I was with 50
Well,
boys, 50 boys in a boys' choir. Go ahead.
no, I'm just joining in. You
Oh,
carry
thank
on.
you. Thank you. I feel I'm back in the choir again. I'm with another one of the choir boys. And that gave me a sense of camaraderie. When you're with other men and you can all sing together, and hopefully do that soberly, um, then there's a kind of bonding that take even if it's material, there's a sense of belonging that the baritones have their role. I think I was a tenor, so I had my role. The altos have their role. The sopranos have their role, and we all come together. And we had a strict choir master, and you had to be on key, and you had to learn how to fill your diaphragm so that when you sang, I mean, when I used to go on Harinam, I would try to like remind the devotees because Prabhupada said the mridanga should never be louder than the chanters. But many times I would walk on the other side of the street, like in downtown Montreal or wherever we were doing Harinam, and I'd be listening, and you'd hear the ching ching ching, ching ching ching, and boom boom boom, and Hare Krishna, and the voices would be like very. And devotees need to learn to fill their diaphragm and Hare Krishna. And I mean, it should be very prevalent, shouldn't it? It should be going into
Yeah,
the ears.
yeah, yeah.
So anyway, I ended up singing, joining a rock and roll band, singing Neil Young songs and Van Morrison songs and Cream and you name it. That was 70s. And then learn, I'm ashamed to say I worked at a Kentucky Fried Chicken to get the money to buy my first guitar. I mean, when my boss was forcing me to do overtime, or else he was going to fire me, I thought, okay, I'm out of here, because it was kind of abusive. And anyway, I learned some Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Peter Frampton, Humble Pie. Tried to learn some, what I was attracted to, and wanted to become this recording engineer. And they said, well, then you'll have to take three sciences. This is at St. John's High School in Winnipeg. And so I thought, okay, physics I understand. You're studying sound waves. I could see how that would contribute to being a sound engineer. But chemistry, and okay, chemistry's fun. I used to have these British chemistry sets my mother would order for me, and I could make little explosions, and they'd end up on the ceiling with a little
Yeah.
Bunsen burner. So I thought, well, that might be fun. But in biology, they wanted me to chop up frogs, and I thought, like, no, I'm not going to do this. And the teacher said, well, if you don't dissect the frogs, then you can't study biology, which meant I couldn't become a recording engineer. And I thought, this is really messed up. What kind of educational system is this? So out of frustration, I went to my music teacher, Mr. George, who was a Quaker and who looked like Robert Redford. And I said to him, Mr. George, I'm frustrated because, I want to be a recording engineer and they won't let me because I won't chop frogs. And I just want to know what the purpose of life is. I was 17 years old. And he said, you come around to my home. I have a gift for you. And normally teachers never were that friendly to invite you to their home. And when I came, his wife offered me a glass of lemonade, and he came out of the back room with a stack of books that would change my life forever. And the books were The Art of Loving and the Art of Dying by Eric Fromm, which expanded my concepts of what death actually meant and what it didn't mean, and the concept of love being beyond just mom and dad and or our nation. Um, uh, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, which introduced me to the concept of renunciation. Um, the Handbook of Higher Consciousness, which explained that it wasn't through some drug-induced experience that I was going to experience nirvana, because drugs are material and spiritual is beyond any drug-induced state. Um, and Richard Hittleman's book of Yoga Asanas, The Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, which gave me the idea, planted the seed of searching for Krishna, going to Vrindavan. That was the first time I heard of Vrindavan, and going on a train to find Krishna. Like, it was sort of like a Hardy Boys novel, an adventure novel, but it had a spiritual theme to it. And last but not least, the Bhagavad Gita, Penguin Classic version by some Spanish author. But it had enough of Krishna's words in it. And I got a record album at that time of an Indian gentleman uh, with plucking sitar speaking, while contemplating the objects of the senses, one develops attachment for them. From attachment, lust arises. From lust, anger. From anger, bewilderment of memory. And when memory is bewildered, one falls back down again into the pool of ignorance, the material pool. And I thought, wow, yeah, that's deep, that's profound, that's true. Wow. And just like the George Harrison song, Within You and Without You, George asks in the next verse, um, are you one of them? Are you one of those people behind that wall of illusion? And I remember even at 12 years old thinking, gee, I hope not. Like those poor people behind a wall of illusion, and then they pass away. And I thought, wow, like, is that everybody? I mean, George got me thinking, thank you, George, my Bhartma Pradarshika guru. So, anyway, sorry, I feel a little self-indulgent talking so much about myself. No one asked me that. So, uh, in
Well,
life,
it's all that is before you met the devotee.
yeah, yeah,
Okay? So how
yeah.
did you meet them?
Yeah, thank you. This is so this is so cool. Someone turning the tables on me is like, because I'm always interested in everybody else. Nobody ever asks me about me. So thank you. You're very kind. So yeah, I'm giving these different examples to show how Krishna. There's that famous saying, when one door closes, another door opens. So I like to Krishnaize that. When Krishna closes one door, okay, you can't be a recording engineer because you won't chop the frogs, but I'm opening the door to the Bhagavad Gita for you. How do you like that? Even if it was, impersonal influenced one, still, I mean, Prabhupada used the Radha Krishna version of Bhagavad Gita in the beginning. He said, just don't read the commentary, but the words are more or less, Sanskrit is Sanskrit. So, yeah, anyway, these Beatle albums, they had an effect on me. I remember when All Things Past, I don't know, you're from the land of the four lads of the Fab Four, so I don't know if you were in the same mindset as me, but before, when it was announced that a Beatle album was coming out, that was like Janmashtami is coming or Gaur Purnima. At that time, for me, it was like something, the double album, the White Album is about to come out. And now, or Abbey Road's about to come out. Let It Be is about to come out. I went to all the movies, the three main movies: Hard Day's Night, Help, Let It Be, which has now been kind of rehashed as Get Back, for all the footage that they didn't show in the past. It was only many years later that I realized that it was Shama Sundar himself that told me, and you can see it in the movie. He's sitting off to the side chanting japa. I think he's wearing saffron, and while the Beatles were recording Let It Be in the studio. And Shama Sundar told me that at one point, I don't know which of the Beatles said to him, so, what's it all about? What's your philosophy all about? And he said he spent an hour and a half in I guess it was Twickenham Studios.
Yeah.
Yeah, for an hour and a half, just explaining our philosophy to the four Beatles, which, wow. So, yeah, I realized although I owe a debt to the Beatles, actually I owe a bigger debt to Shama Sundar, Malati, Mukunda, Janaki, uh, Sarasvati, she was there too, Guru Das Prabhu and Yamuna, for cultivating the Beatles, because as Shama Sundar Prabhu had hatched his plan to Prabhupada, if we can get Hare Krishna to the Beatles, Hare Krishna will become a household name throughout the whole world. And it worked. It was a ingenious plot. So that's how I was coming. Because so I remember when it was announced that All Things Must Pass, which was 1970, was coming out. I could hardly wait. And already on the radio, I was like, my sweet Lord, hallelujah, oh my Lord, Hare Krishna. And I was singing along with it, not really knowing that I was ending my material life. I mean, I really wish I was ending my material life. But anyway, I was, gradually just burning up karma. And um, so then, yeah, by chanting the names of the Lord and you'll be free. The Lord is awaiting on us all to awaken and see. Beware of darkness, beware of Maya, the art of dying. Hear me, Lord. All these, as Prabhupada said, I will give you, based on our acharyas, he said to George, I will give you ideas for writing songs. So this was all coming out. Jaya Krishna Krishna, Jaya Krishna, Jaya Shri Krishna, living in the material world. Wow, that was the next album. So all these samskaras, they were leaving their transcendental scars, so to speak,
Mm.
on my consciousness, priming me. And so anyway, I kept practicing. Went from Chuck Berry to the Gypsy Woman told my mama before I was born. Getting into the Chicago blues, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, B.B. King, Albert King, Freddie King, Hound Dog Taylor, Elmore James, you name it. I was immersed. I was a monk of Chicago blues. 8 hours a day trying to figure out Eric Clapton and the Blues Breakers solos, Mick Taylor and John Mayall solos, Peter Green. I was a big Yardbirds fan, Jeff Beck, Jamie Page, Eric Clapton. I used to go to every week to the public library to read Melody Maker, Chris Welch's column, at memorizing the whole British music scene, which included the British blues scene, Alexis Corner, Cyril Davies, all of that. And so yeah, I got together a little blues band with a professional drummer, a nice Jewish piano player named Norman Wiseman, a nice Jewish bass player. I forget his name now. I'm sorry. My respects to him. I can't remember his name now. It's been 50 years. And so yeah, we were doing the bars around Winnipeg, and then I was coming home from a bar at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, with my guitar case, and I saw this fellow, very tall, with white robes, standing on the corner of my street in front of this house, standing very calmly and shaved head, and I didn't know what that was. I didn't put two and two together that this is a Hare Krishna devotee. And I had my fedora, my Al Capone type hat on to go with my bogus persona, trying to be a Chicago blues man.
I can just, I can just see it.
And carrying my machine gun, so to speak. I mean, my guitar, in my case. And I'm looking out from under my fedora. I don't want to like gawk at him, but I'm like really intrigued. Like, what is that? What is he like? Did he just get off a spaceship or something? Like, and he had the perfect mantra for me. You know, um, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You get on someone's wavelength, right? If you can get on someone's wavelength, like what their passion is, then you've got an instant rapport. And that was why I started this conversation with you to establish this rapport, because I wanted to go deeper into the Bengali and the culture, and I still have more questions to ask you. Anyway, so I guess he saw that I was sort of checking him out. You could hear a pin drop. I'm not even sure the birds were chirping yet. Completely peaceful, 3 or 4 in the morning. And he said to me, "What kind of axe are you playing?" And that threw me for a spin because he was otherworldly, but yet he was speaking like an insider musician because that was the vernacular. Musicians call them axes. What's your axe, man? What kind of axe are you playing? Is it a Fender? Is it a Gibson? And so he immediately, and now I had heard a rumor that some Hare Krishna monk had come into the Winnipeg area on a blue school bus and that three members of a very talented jazz rock fusion band out of um, Regina, is that Alberta or Saskatchewan? I think Saskatchewan, the neighboring province. And they had dropped out of their very, because for me, jazz was the next level. To play jazz, you had to really know your chops, either classically trained or maybe. And they were already doing this, and they had dropped out and shaved their heads and become Hare Krishna monks. And I like, did they take too much LSD, or like, why did they do that? Because what I was trying to get to, they had achieved, and they gave it all up. So that was very intriguing. And I didn't realize I was speaking to one of them at that very moment. And what kind of axe are you playing, man? And I immediately walked over. I said, it's an Epiphone Riviera. And I opened it up. I said, it's just like a Gibson 335, like what George Harrison plays, like a Epiphone Casino, and like what Keith Richards plays. And he said, oh, did you know that George Harrison's into Hare Krishna? I said, oh yeah, I've got the All Things Must Pass album. I sing along with it. I even have the Radha Krishna Temple album. And and I followed the Swami inside. I'm trying to like repeat the Sanskrit lyric. I put on a black light, the green glowing light, and I light incense. And I close my eyes, and I sing, and I listen to that album, and I chant Om. And he said, oh, well, we have a Sunday love feast. I think you would really enjoy it. Why don't you come? This was the summer. This was, no, it's spring of 1975, like say May or something like that. So I went, and I remember going up the stairs and smelling the combination of spiritual sky, strawberry incense mixed with ghee, clarified butter, which I'd never smelled before. I'm like, wow, that's quite ambrosial. And I was like full of anticipation. Okay, what's going to happen to me at the Hare Krishna temple? This is because it was the age of experimenting with consciousness, right? We had done it with drugs. Now I wanted to do it with meditation. And so I came in. There was no, I didn't meet anyone at first, and I peeped my head in the temple room door, which was like a combination of what we called a living room and a dining room. It was an old house, two or three-story house, and with oak trees down the street. It was called Home Street, which was appropriate since we are going back to home, right? So I popped in my head, and there was so many flowers on the altar. I didn't realize that there were actually personalities there. And then I realized that these two faces that looked like sunflowers, I would later find out was Shushi, Gaura, and Nitai. And I think they were made of paper mache made by Bardaraj Prabhu many years before. But I was, if you go to San Francisco, wear some flowers in your hair. And so the altar was filled with flowers. It was flower power. We were flower children. And so I was very attracted to all the flowers that was there. That was very cool. And then shortly after, the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, arrived, equivalent to your BBC. And which I realized is just a government institution, and they're like very they censor anything which is counter narrative. Anyway, that's a whole other story. So anyhow, I guess they weren't so counter narrative that day because they came to film the devotees at the Sunday feast, and they were set up in the corner. I thought, wow, this is really cool. I get to be on national television. And then soon the devotees arrived, and at this point, I had worked in a record warehouse and a record store. I had 800 record albums. By the time I was like 19 years old, I would just eat craft dinner and spend all my paycheck on all the newest records, all the British imports. And so I was going from Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf to their influences of Robert Johnson and Charlie Patton, and then found Blind Willie Johnson was like singing gospel, Jesus, and I can't remember their songs now, but it was like they were like sincerely calling out to Krishna because they were slaves and picking cotton and getting whipped. And I mean, not always. I've heard that some slave owners were actually very kind to their slaves, but I'm sure many were not. And so then I went from gospel music of the deep south from the 20s to African tribal music. Brian Jones got me into that through his Pipes of Jujuka. It was an album he made of Moroccan flutes and pipes being played, and so that gave me a little taste for ethnic music. And so I was listening to African tribal music and trying to like get a taste for the drumming and the chanting. And so then as soon as I heard the mridanga being played, I immediately like connected with the, oh wow, that's so cool. That sounds so tribal, so ethnic, so authentic. And I was sort of a self-made musicologist. You know, I just music addict, anything to do with music, especially. And I wanted to be a cultural anthropologist too. My sister had subscribed to National Geographic for me as a boy, so you know I remember reading about Angkor Wat, and it was created by some 12th century Hindu king Suryavarman, and studying about Atlantis and Mu and I was in the Egyptians, and I was so fascinated to go back and back and go back, get back to the roots of civilization. Where does it all come from? Where is it all? And so that mridanga represented that to me. And the devotees started to chant Hare Krishna, the Maha Mantra. And I'd also heard that in the Hair album that I was selling at the record store, and it was like selling like hotcakes. It was flying off the shelf, and it had the, and we would always play records that we wanted to sell. So I'd hear the Hare Krishna chant. I remember there was an album called by a group out of England called Quintessence, and that was also the Hare Krishna chant was included in that. And I heard that Vyasaki Prabhu, he was also a member of that band for a while. So all these different Hare Krishna influences were coming to me through the pop culture, through the counterculture. And now I was meeting an authentic Hare Krishna Vaishnav, and very soon I would come to know his name was Nandi Keshvara Prabhu, who was the president of that Winnipeg temple, who would soon go on to become the temple president of Montreal Temple, which when I visited it in 1976, 77, he had 120 full-time devotees there. I mean, that place was jumping. That's where I met Keshi Shatru Prabhu, and we had the Atma band with Mahavirya and Parad, who's known as Patrick Bernard, the New Age singer. He was in that band, and Mahajan Prabhu, and they would get to practice up in the Prasadam Hall, and I always felt a little jealous of them because when I went with Nandikeshvara, he invited me. He said he sold me a Macmillan Bhagavad Gita on the spot. I think I gave him the $5 I had for it. I loved the feast. Wow, it was like psychedelic food. I'd never had, when mom kicked me out at 17 because I didn't want to go to the university but wanted to be a musician. Like, gee, I don't have mom's home cooking anymore. What am I gonna do? And I thought, well, it was always special to have Chinese takeout, but now I can have Chinese take-in every day if I want. So I got a wok and a wok cookbook. And in the beginning, it was just, I was already in the direction of being vegetarian. I was over 15 or 16. I was in the baseball field, and I gave my friend a bunch of balls to throw at me so I could improve my batting average. And I didn't know my little Cocker Spaniel Beagle, whose name was Homer, was right behind me. And when I swung the bat, I smashed Homer in the head. My heart shattered, and Homer went running to my mom's house across the street. Yap, 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 yap. And I dropped my bat, and I ran after Homer to console him. And there he was under the kitchen table. Mom was like, "What's going on?" And there's little Homer with his eyes bugged out, shaking. And I was trying to console him. He was afraid of me. And that gave me some kind of slap of reality that whether I was conscious of it or not, when you're eating meat, that's what you're doing. You're actually doing much, much more worse than just smashing Homer in the head. You're slitting them up the middle and to their entrails, and I mean, horrible, horrible. So anyway, yeah, I was already, more or less vegetarian, but when I tasted prasadam, wow, my taste buds exploded. I mean, pakoras with different chutneys and samosas, and the sweet rice. They used to put camphor in it in the old days, edible camphor, and that shot right up your nose. I thought, wow, this is a mind blowing experience. I never experienced anything like this while eating before, and so it was just it was a a festival for all the senses. The beautiful altar with the deities, the chants of sound vibration. I remember I got into dancing in the kirtan right away, and what what immediately struck me is, like when you're a musician and you're up on the stage and you got everyone shucking and jiving and doing their mating ritual on the dance floor, it's completely different than when you're just dancing for the pleasure of Krishna, as Prabhupada showed us with the Swami step. So I plugged right in. I got into the mantra. I started dancing immediately. Then fascinating talk on reincarnation and how we're not the body, and Krishna is the reservoir of pleasure, and it's He who we want to connect with. And then the amazing feast, and then he sold me the Gita. He told me to come back again. So I'd come every Sunday, and then he announced, we're going to Chicago. We're going to drive 13 hours to go and meet our spiritual master. You know, the one that lived in John Lennon's house there in Tittenhurst and Ascot for 3 months? Yeah, we're going to go and see him. Do you want to come and meet him? And I thought, well, God, I've got a band, we've got gigs, but we're just not getting so much work these days for some reason. I went to my head booking agent, Frank Weiner, at the Hungry Eye Agency, and I said, Jim Cale, the bass player of the Guess Who, he's helping us to get some gigs right now. I just wanted to let you know. And he said, if you go to him, instead of charging you 10%, I'm going to charge you 20%. I thought, whoa, these music people, they can be nasty, nasty. So I started getting a little insight. I mean, the members of the Ivies, the Badfinger, two of them committed suicide because their agents and managers tied up their music so badly in the courts. So I was just naive. I just love to play music, and I love to see people dance. That was fun for me. Like one of the Beatles said, playing music's a lot better than working for a living. So anyway, yeah. So I asked the other band members, do you mind if since we don't have any work for a few weeks, I'm thinking of going with these Hare Krishna people to meet their guru in Chicago. Of course, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I want to meet Muddy Waters, B.B. King, Albert King, Hound Dog Taylor, and so forth. Yeah, but I also want to meet A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, because my yoga books explained you need to find a bona fide guru. And I thought, where am I going to find a bona fide guru on the prairies of Manitoba? So I asked a friend of mine who played blues harp, Gary Preston, because he had a degree in theology from the University of Manitoba, and he was a little older than me, and I looked up to him. And I said, who do you think is the most authentic of all the gurus on the scene now? Because there was Sri Chinmoy and Guru Maharaji and Satchidananda and this one and such a Sly Baba and so many. So he pointed to a photo of black and white photo of Srila Prabhupada on his wall, and he said, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. He's the no frills Swami. He's the real deal. He's the one that's really representing the culture and the tradition. And remember, it was a very sober looking. It wasn't like Maharishi with a big smile holding a flower and a big beard. And it wasn't like that vibe at all. It was like, this is serious business. I'm not here to win a popularity contest. That's what I got from looking at the photo, which Prabhupada said, we're not here to win a popularity contest. We are not a mutual backpatting society. So that struck me, because my friend was endorsing Srila Prabhupada, and now I was meeting the people who were the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. I also met the bass player from that Wascana jazz rock fusion band at that temple. His name was Dharma Prana, who's still living at the Toronto temple to this day, even though half his body became paralyzed by colitis. He's there every morning for Mangal Arti. I met Duryodhan Guru Prabhu, Drew Lawrence, who's I think is now living in Ireland, who's a famous world astrologer, and who created the Balaram Mridanga book, which explained how to play mridanga according to notation, because he is a professional jazz drummer. And so then, a week or two later, we got in the Volkswagen van. I mean, what other kind of van would Hare Krishna devotees be driving in the 60s and 70s? And we made that 13-hour drive down to Chicago, Chicago, Illinois. And we arrived a day or two before Prabhupada came, and they were painting the whole temple white inside. It was a former um, YMCA with a big swimming pool in it, and all the men slept around the swimming pool, and in the swimming pool, the Rath Yatra chariot was being stored, and you wanted to make sure you didn't roll over into the empty swimming pool. So amazingly, it never happened. And so then, yes, I had the great privilege to go to O'Hare, or O'Hare Krishna Airport, as Prabhupada asked us to ask the managers to rename it. And Prabhupada is coming, Prabhupada is coming. And everyone jumped into the vans and cars and whatever was available. I remember seeing Vishnu John Swami's bus there. The back door was open and I peered in. This was before we left. And I saw an Esaraj for the first time, or Sharangi, and an Ektar, and a Tambura, and harmonium mridanga, and I was so attracted by these instruments. I wanted to get on the bus, but I was afraid. I thought, if I get on this bus, maybe I'll never be able to get off. So I better be careful, because I was attached, right? So yeah, we all raced to O'Hare Airport, 10-mile drive across the city, and Prabhupada was supposed to either arrive at the American or the United Air Terminal, and we were all at one, and we had this uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Help me with my vocabulary. I don't want to call it a cacophony, a tumultuous kirtan, reverberating in the airline terminal. Hare Krishna, with, I don't know, 400 devotees were there. I think if we did that today, we'd be seen as terrorists or something. And immediately I could see who were the pious and who were the straight or establishment oriented stewardesses and captains. The more devotee like air flight attendants and captains were like, wow, cool, like, wow, what a difference in our day. And then the more demoniac ones, the ones that belong to the establishment, to big corporation minded people, like, who let these people in here, like, what are they doing in here? The atheists, right? And so then they announced over the announcements that flight so and so is appearing in either Air or United Pan American, the other terminal. And so then I think Krishna must have arranged it, because the full 400 devotees had to go from one side of the terminal doing Harinam to the other side of the terminal. So the whole airline terminal became affected by the holy names of the Lord. And then the kirtan was building and building. And then the big glass doors opened and different people started coming through. And then finally, Srila Prabhupada walked through. He had perfect, like all in a second, I just remember. Prabhupada had perfect posture. He carried himself like a nobleman, like a dignitary. And, like the way that the chiropractor will tell you, okay, chin in, shoulders back, to have good posture. Prabhupada was like that. And he was only 5'2". Like, the way the kirtan was building, I expected Prabhupada to be like 6 feet tall or something. Prabhupada was just like of modest stature. And, I'd gone to see Rolling Stones before, and, narcissistic type personalities like Jagger and with a big, paparazzi, and Prabhupada was getting definitely the biggest reception I've ever heard. But the big distinction was Prabhupada was not full of himself at all. From my perspective, in retrospect, for Prabhupada, it was all about us. It wasn't about him. He was just so happy to see all his sons and daughters. He was just beaming, smiling. Just Krishna's love was flowing out of him. And immediately everyone hit the dust. They hit the dirt. They hit the floor. So I did the same thing, because that's what you do for Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya. And then I remember devotees started showering. They were showering him with flower petals. It was just like in 1 second, such a tsunami. I remember seeing when Prabhupada walked in, tears were squirting out of the devotees' eyes while they were simultaneously smiling in ecstasy. I'd never seen such a what appeared to be a conflict of emotions. You know, this joy and tears at the same time. It was unbelievable. Thank you for allowing me to share that experience again. I felt like I was there. And the sannyasis, they circled around Prabhupada to make sure no one would bump into him. And devotees were trying to touch his feet. And he was being like barricaded so that he couldn't even walk. You know, they could make a pathway for him. And then it was like all over in, in a few minutes. And everyone headed back to the temple. You know, I wasn't used to waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was used to going to bed at 4 o'clock because that's when musicians end their day at 2 or 3 in the morning. So the one time I remember Prabhupada at the Chicago temple, I peered in from the mezzanine one morning and I saw these 4 or 5 sets of little golden men, sets of Gornitai deities that were meant to be established on the various vans or buses, because there was over 100 Radha Damodar brahmacharis there that had come to get initiated, and and Prabhupada was pouring this white thick liquid over these golden men, and I was just a guy off the street. I just met the devotees a few weeks ago. I had no clue why he was pouring yogurt over Abhishek ceremony for the deities, right? And I'm watching all of this. I had no one around me to explain anything. So yeah, uh, but then when Prabhupada left, I made some contacts at the bars in Chicago, and unfortunately, I didn't stay. I went and ended up playing in Byther Smith's Chicago Blues Band, and then I was approached by Jimmy Mays, who has credits on some of Jimi Hendrix's albums, accompanying him, and I became a redneck in a soul band. I was getting down. I was getting down. But after a while, I decided I don't want to get any further down. You know, I don't want to smell like a cigarette at the end of every night. I don't want to be surrounded by people who are constantly drinking beer. And so I started coming back to the temple after about 6 months in greater earnest. My Hare Krishna cookbook gave all the ingredients, so I went out and bought the ghee and the turmeric and all the spices, and I was making prasadam at home. I had a photo of Guru Gauranga, and I was offering my food to Srila Prabhupada and Panchatattva every day. And I had this record album called Every Town and Village, and I still remember one of the melodies. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And I got totally into it. So I didn't realize I was purifying myself, and I guess that was why I was like, well, I still love the blues sounds, but I didn't like the people's habits. And we were on our way to Nashville, and we were going to record an album, and we won the Battle of the Bands contest, and we had a year of Holiday Inns and Ramada Inns lined up. And I realized, you know what? I'd be a phony if I decided to continue. Wearing a yellow tuxedo with a black bow tie and 4-inch white platform shoes. I mean, we were like the kind of bands that Hendrix played in, you know, the R&B, what they call the Chitlin circuit. But I just thought, no. I mean, I know too much now. Like, what would happen if I turned 30 years old and I realized that, this life really wasn't the life for me, with 2.2, children in suburbia, assuming that I would have taken that would have been more the university life. And so I thought, let me give it a shot. So, um, on the way to the temple, oh yeah, here was the final kind of nail in the coffin to kind of like help me to detach. Our drummer Jimmy Mays, he'd gone through the Detroit airport and he met a book distributor, and this was, I don't know, maybe October, November of '75, yeah. And he said, "Oh, I got a boy in my band. He's into this Krishna stuff." And that book distributor gave him an Ancha Leela, Volume 5, and a Reservoir of Pleasure. And he said, "You give this to him." So I just finished reading Jimi Hendrix's biography, where he unceremoniously leaves his body suffocating on his vomit and alcohol in some British apartment. And what a sad, sad ending for like an incredible, incredible talent. I remember one of his lyrics: "If I don't meet you in this life, I'll meet you in the next. But don't be late." And so, there was some references to transcendence. And it was that album, this is his second album, Acts as Bold as Love, where when you fold it out, it's actually the Virat Roop. And I knew that Jimmy, Noel Redding, and Mitch Mitchell's faces were not the original faces, but I didn't know who the original faces were in 1968 when the album came out. And I was very intrigued. I felt I was on a mission to find out who are the original faces that Jimi Hendrix, Noel Redding, and Mitch Mitchell were eclipsing. And to give the correct story, it was not Jimmy's choice to make this offense to Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, but it was actually Chas Chandler, the former bass player for the Animals, who became his manager, or maybe it was his misinterpretation, I don't know, but Jimmy said that he wanted to have, some representation of the Indian culture, because he was part Cherokee Indian. That's what he wanted. But because Indian culture from India was, the rage at the time, along with smoking up and everything else, then I guess they decided to cash in on that opportunity. So yeah, I told Jimmy Mays, I don't think that living a musician's life really is for me. I didn't realize it was going to be so much drugs and alcohol and etc. So he said he understood, and he offered to drive me to the temple in his green Cadillac. And, but as I was sitting in the back seat, I dropped something on the floor, and I lifted up the mat to get it, and there was a mini joint, and I'd stopped smoking pot for probably, I don't know, 6 months, because of meeting the devotees. I remember on the ride down from Winnipeg to Chicago, I felt the urge to light up a cigarette. But I thought, well, no way, the devotees aren't going to let me do that. They'll start chastising me. And but then I realized, I got this monkey on my back. I got to give this up once and for all. And I'm not someone to litter. I'll pick up other people's litter before I litter. But I opened up the window and I flung my cigarette pack out the door as we were flying down the highway. And I immediately felt a sense of liberation. I realized, wow, I can do this, because I felt helpless before that even though I want to give up this habit, you really got a hold on me. And so, because of the association of the devotees, I realized there's definitely something to be said by living with devotees or being in their company. They gave me strength. So yeah, so I lit up that joint even though I'd stopped smoking, and I'd never gotten the headache from smoking. But I think maybe instant karma is going to get you. It's going to knock you off your feet. And so yeah, I got a splitting headache, and I thought, wow, that's really weird. It was just a tiny little one. And so as I was coming up the stairs of the temple with my suitcase, saying goodbye to my band leader, Madhu Vrata, a kind of eccentric godbrother, he was there with a plate of Prabhupada cookies, shortbread, and he offered me one. And as soon as I bit into it and started consuming it, immediately the headache disappeared, and I thought, wow, the power of prasadam. So the rest of the story is a whole other story. But yeah, that was, and then before I knew it, I wasn't in my yellow tuxedo anymore. I was with an ISKCON can on downtown State Street. I think it was like a 6-lane highway. And I found, of all the people that I tried to stop with my candy cane, because this was Christmas, 1975 Christmas marathon, the Black Mamas. They were the sweetest and most pious people of all. I could always get them to stop and give a quarter in the can, which paid for a BTG, because they weren't, now they say $4 on the cover. Back then it was 175 in a box, and for every quarter I got, Actually, they were. I was told every dollar I got, I could give a BTG, and so yeah, that I had no bhakta. That was my bhakta program. You're just thrown out on the street. Here's your bag of kitchery. We'll come back in 8 hours. Make sure that you distributed all 175 of those magazines. Because that's really kind of like they didn't say that that was you were allowed to come back to the temple if you distribute 175, but it was sort of like it was expected of you that you would get out all those magazines. So I was like, I remember being really in earnest, like I've got to get out all. I can't let anyone get by me without them getting a magazine. And I immediately took a love to Vishnu Dutt Prabhu. He had like lived in Bengal, and he was an expert mridanga player, and Gopati Prabhu also, and he was amazing. Both of them were amazing cooks. Gopati had learned from Anand Das Brahmachari, or Anand Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta's personal cook, and Jamuna Devi. So the prasadam he was preparing was like melted in your mouth, and between Uttama Shloka's kirtans, because he had learned from Krishna Das Babaji through recordings, and Vishnu Dutt's authentic kirtans and absorption of Bengali culture, and he'd get us all dancing in a circle, and he had all the moves down, and he gave me my first Mridanga lesson. Gitata, 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 Gita, Gintata, 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 Ginta. And so all of a sudden, this absorption in the culture of Mahaprabhu that Srila Prabhupada had given us, and before I knew it, I was being asked to go in a van with a Radha Damodar bus leader, Mahamuni Prabhu, and getting dropped off at busy street lights in Little Rock, Arkansas, Dallas, Texas, New Orleans, and getting thrown in jail because I usually didn't have a permit, so they put me in jail for the day. And I thought, gee, when I, was selling pot back in Canada, this never happened to me, and now I'm trying to serve the Lord, and I keep ending up in the jail, and they offer me bologna sandwiches. Like, no, I can't eat that. I'm a vegetarian. And by the end of the day, I'd get bailed out. But it was exciting, and I was with 7 or 8 other men, and my service every morning was to go out and search for flowers, because we would it would be one devotee would register at the motel, and all 7 or 8 of us would duck down, and then as soon as we go in the motel, when we push the beds up against the wall, and then we put a blanket over the mirror so that we couldn't see ourselves, so that we wouldn't get in the bodily conception of life. That's how fanatic we were. And I'd go out every morning searching for flowers for our little altar, and then we'd have a very quiet Mangal Artik, and we had the homemade granola. That was our standard fare: a quart of buttermilk and some granola, and we'd go out all day long distributing BTGs, 175 per box, seeing America. It was so nice to be in Dallas, Texas, and not see any snow. It was my first winter without snow. And then I got promoted to being the gopher on Tripurari Swami's party. I got to go out every morning. Like, these books were coming hot off the press. Fourth Canto Part 2, Fourth Canto Part 3, Fourth Canto Part 4, Fifth Canto Part 1, Fifth Canto Part 2, Ajamil, Sixth Canto Part 1. As they becoming hot off the press from Los Angeles, I'd be loading them from the air. Like, we'd make a chain gang from the air container that was being delivered to the temple, and we put all the books in the basement. But then my service was to take all those boxes, load them into the van, because we were going out with, I don't know, it was 8 devotees maybe, I can't remember now. Pragosh Prabhu, the book distributor, Prabhupada's disciple. Tripurari Swami, who was in charge. He had 90 Radha Damodar men under his charge for that book distribution party. Vaisheshika Prabhu, who was on that party. And then other devotees would come, like Swavas, who's now been president of the Los Angeles Temple for many years. His brother Naikatma, Divyanga came also. Jiva Goswami, Dristadumna would sometimes come to that airport. It was like you didn't want to get left behind at the temple, because the fun was out there at the air terminal floor, because devotees would be meeting Jeff Beck and Muhammad Ali and you name it. They were meeting generals and admirals and sports stars and rock stars. Vaisheshika Prabhu told me one story. I said, can you tell me about a celebrity that you might have met at the airport? He said, yeah, one time I was at the airport with Bopadev, and and he said, "Hey, that's Mick Jagger and his wife, Bianca." And so Bopadev, I think, had to go or something, but Vaishika said, "No, I'm going to stay here," because he saw him go into one of the um, kiosks, one of the little boutique shops at the airport. So Vaish stood outside, and Mick and Bianca went in, and then they came out like, I don't know, 15 minutes later or whatever. And Vaish went, "Mick," and I think he said Mick. I don't think he said Mr. Jagger. I think he said Mick. And then Mick turned around and he said, "Yes," and he said, I have a gift for you." And Mick went, "Don't bore me," and he kept walking, but Bianca stayed, and she said, "What is it?" And he said, "Oh, this is the Bhagavad Gita, ancient book of wisdom from India, yoga meditation." And she said, "Oh," she said, "Don't mind him. He's always like that." And she gave him a $20 donation, and she accepted Bhagavad Gita, which is very. So there was always, when we'd come back at like 5 o'clock each day, 4:30, 5 o'clock, whenever we'd end, like, because I'd also pack the prasadam, and I'd lay out the prasadam for them at a deserted airline terminal elevator shaft, and I'd get wet towels for them so they wouldn't skip a beat. As soon as they finished prasadam, they'd have their wet paper towel, and they'd be like back out on the floor. And it was extremely competitive. You know, they were like each trying to do 100 hardbound Bhagavad Gitas, Bhagavatams every day. They'd be in bed by 8 o'clock at night. If I didn't go to bed by 8 o'clock, like, I can't sleep there. I got to go someplace else, because they would be up by 2, get all their japa done before Mangalarti, and while everyone else is doing their japa, they're reading. You know, trying to like really intensify and purify themselves so that when they got out there and they were meeting all these admirals and generals and sports stars and rock stars, they were fit because there were like so many like, "Get out of my way, I'm not interested," da 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 da. But you know, they had the mental, spiritual, intellectual strength to be able to stop the. I was just in like, you know, no longer was BB King and Albert King and Muddy Waters my heroes. My godbrothers became my heroes. They were the Maharatis. They were able to do superhuman feats, stopping, these very influential people in society. So yeah, that was like the second half, and eventually I was given my own street party to head out to the parking lots every day, and then eventually I was asked if I'd like to come back to Canada because I got booted out of Memphis for doing books in the parking lot there. And so yeah, I've been here for the last more or less for the last 47 years. 4 years spent traveling with Romapad Swami, 6 months with Gunagrahi Maharaj and taking care of his 12 bhaktas, and Danavir Maharaj for a year and a half, and Ganapati Swami for 6 months. Tried getting married a couple times. I ain't the marrying kind. It seems, as Hank Williams might have saying, it's difficult to, um, uh, balance both. You want to be a full-time devotee at the same time. We have desires. They have desires. But anyway, sorry for going off on a tirade there. But
That's all right. What's the time? 9:30. What time is it there?
I meant to interview you. Okay, it was. It's 4:30 here. I should let you wind down for the evening, but maybe we can do a part two, but really dedicate this one to you.
Yeah. Did you ever know Udayananda?
Yes, I met Udayananda when I was down in the North Carolina region for a month or two. I was down there, and he invited me to a fundraiser at his home, where he invited Indradyumna Swami to because he was doing a fundraiser for Indradyumna Swami's preaching in Poland. And Kalyapani came to that, and Kalyapani was amazing. He came to live with me for 3.5 months. It was like 3.5 of the best months I've had in years. Kalyapani put on the Lord Narasimhadev play, the pastime, playing the role of Hiranyakashipu, Prahlad, Lord Nrsingadev, Narada Muni. He played all the parts as one person. Then he picked up a guitar and he sang some songs about Krishna. He just blew my mind. But yes, so Udayananda helped Pragosh Prabhu to become a devotee. They both joined in Detroit together. Why do you mention his name?
Well, because he was one of the devotees that preached to me when I first joined ISKCON. He was in the manor for year or so.
Oh,
And Pragosh, they both of them, Pragosh and Udayananda, gave me a lift about 30 miles home because they said they would give me a lift, and so they did in a big Mercedes car. So I really liked Udayananda. I thought he was a nice guy. I didn't talk so much with Pragosh, and at that time in the early 80s, they were already these people were celebrities.
yes,
Oh, here comes so and so, here comes so
yes.
he's distributed so many books, blah blah blah.
I saw Pragosh Prabhu at the Rath Yatra in New York. Um, 3 years ago, now that Ramabhadra wasn't banning people who were against selling the temple, it was terrible. I worked for a year and a half trying to help save that temple, working with Jayadvaita Swami to keep that temple for ISKCON, putting out messages every month. Anyway, I was talking to these two students of Danudar Maharaj just outside the Hoyt and Skirmerhorn Radha Govinda temple, and then I get a tap on the shoulder, and I turn around, and at first I didn't recognize him. And then he said, "It's Pragosh." And I said, "Wow, Pragosh, Haribol," and gave him a hug. And then I introduced him to the other devotees. And I said, Pragosh, he's met some of the top celebrities in the world, distributed Prabhupada's books to them. I said, can you give us a celebrity story? And he said, "Oh, a celebrity story?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, one of the more favorable people you met." He said, "Okay." He said, "One day I was out there distributing Life Comes from Life books. I don't know which airport. And Charlton Heston came through. I'm sure you know who Charlton Heston is. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's almost like a Shakespearean speaker, isn't he,
He is.
Charlton?"
Well, I think he probably cut his teeth with Shakespeare. Most of them good actors did.
Uh-huh.
They
Yes,
have to learn Shakespeare first.
right. He's an American Shakespearean. I'm mentioning Shakespeare because Mathura Prabhu told me that you're fond of
Yes.
his literature and other great, great. Yeah, I want to get into all that with you. Anyway, so he distributed Life Comes from Life to Charlton Heston, and he said to him, uh, uh, oh, while he was speaking to him, distributing the book, when a born again Christian came up and said, "Oh, you don't want to take this book. He's a Hare Krishna, and they're just a cult, mind controlling." And Charlton Heston said to him, "I don't remember inviting you." And the guy had to leave. So then Charles Pragosh went on to say that when I was a young boy, my mother dressed me and my brothers and sisters up in our finest Sunday clothes, little suits, and took us to see you at the movie theater when you played Ben Hur. And Charlton Heston he became humbled by that. "Oh, thank you very much." So that was the story that Pragosh had told me. Yeah.
Awesome.
Pragosh is amazing. Yeah, I don't know where Udayananda Prabhu is. Pragosh is in touch with me on Facebook. I asked him, what are some of your best comebacks to atheists? Because recently in my local group called Erin Community Talk, um, one lady was asking, "So what's everyone's opinion about what's going on in Ukraine?" And so I gave some kind of theistic response, how, you know, people are experiencing karma and it's morality amongst thieves, Putin or Biden, everything belongs to God. Anyone who thinks that anything belongs to them is a criminal. And so one lady wrote, when I read what you wrote, I'm disgusted. There is no God. And, you can believe in someone up in the sky or whatever. So I said, I've got a question for you. And I remember getting this response from Pragosh Prabhu in the Sankirtan newsletter. And I never forgot it. It's great. If someone says they're an atheist, oh, okay, well, that's it. That's very interesting. May I ask you a question? Yes. Do you have a father? Yes. Well, did your father have a father? Yes, my grandfather. Well, did your father's father's father have a father? Yeah, my great grandfather. Well, what I want to know is which one of them didn't have a father? Because that's what atheism means. I thought, isn't that a great way of dealing with atheism?
Yeah.
So I asked him, I said, do you have any other good responses like that? And he sent me a response on Facebook today, 20 20 responses. I haven't opened it up yet. But I remember that's one thing I really loved about being with the book distributors is they were very sharp on their feet, because they were absorbed in hearing and chanting. You might hear something coming out of the Krishna book the, the night before, while they were approaching people, while they were answering. Sorry, are you frozen there? I can't hear you.
Am I, am I frozen?
You're
You
coming through a
seem to
little bit.
be a bit.
Yeah, while you were speaking, different
Mm.
thoughts came to me. Like, I'd love to learn Bengali. Maybe I don't love to learn it enough, but I'm just wondering, like, how did you learn that? Did you learn that just by being with other Bengali people? Did you get a book? Did you listen to YouTubes? When I heard that you got kicked out, I wanted to get the details on the basis of what. uh, what were you told? That the reason, because you had gone to hear from some people in Gaudiya Mat that was considered a sin, or like, I'm just trying to understand the reasoning behind that. It was interesting to hear about the austerity of the Gaudiya Mat, because I remember Jagadish, when he was in Maharaj some years ago, he posted like, what are the rules for staying in the Gaudiya Mat? Like, you can't wear shoes, or you don't get a bed. You have to sleep just with a blanket on a hard floor. I mean, he was saying that most of our sannyasis would fall down if they had to follow the standard of the Gaudiya Mat. They wouldn't be able to do it. We're not austere enough to do it. And yeah, those are some of my additional questions to you. And as you would speak, I would
Well,
have more questions. Go ahead.
Bengali, as far as learning Bengali goes, it starts right back near the beginning. So it's over a long, long period of time. As far as spoken Bengali and everyday conversation in Bengali, I'm rubbish. My knowledge of Bengali is almost entirely restricted to the books. So it's quite different. It's like if you only learnt Shakespeare and tried to communicate with people on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't work. So if you want to be around Bengali people and pick up Bengali, that's good. But it's not going to be much use if you want to learn the books. The only way really is to learn to read it, and once you've learned to read it, just read it. But it's taken me decades to do that, and I still have a lot to learn.
But you
One of
sound
the
Bengali. When I hear you speak, I'm thinking, wow, he's a white Bengali. Or when you
well, I was going to say, when I was a child, both my parents worked, and I was an only child, and
you
so they sent me to a childminder. So after school and during the school holidays, I was with a Bengali family called Das. That was their name.
very nice. So you assimilated,
Yeah.
metamorphosis.
Well, I had a lot of influence for the Bengali culture through them. Just being there all the time and doing what they do and living like they live in the holidays. And so that maybe have had given me a bit of a boost. And
That was
also,
Krishna's arrangement for sure.
yeah, maybe. And then also, my friend when I was a teenager was a Banerjee. He was a Subhan, no, Sumit Banerjee. He and I used to do paper rounds together. So I had a lot of Bengali influence. And I remember he had an older sister who would just, if I went in his house and his older sister was sitting there, I just stopped and just stared at her. Because I just couldn't get how anyone could look so nice in my mind. He'd go, what are you doing? Oh, sorry. Carry on. So I already had a deep attraction for it, and also in the part of London that I'm from, northwest London, um, there was Indians everywhere. Gujarati people came in 1973 when I was still at school. So I came back. I came to school in 1973 in September, and the first new term. And now at least 10 kids in the school in the class were Indians. All of a sudden, there was 10 Indians now in the class, and they were all named Patel,
Huh.
but they were not brothers. They all had the same
Oh,
surname.
cousins or something.
Yeah, well, no, that you're finding the Gujarati community, they're nearly all Patels.
Patel
It's more of
Motels.
a it's a more of a caste name than a surname. You know what I mean? Patel.
And
They're
and
all
and
Patel.
what caste would that be? Vaishya, because they seem to run all the motels and
Yeah, they're
businesses.
merchant caste. Yeah, business
Okay.
caste. So anyway, I spent a misspent youth, a bit like you. I was really into music, but I was into first when I left school, I was into punk rock for about a year, and then I got fed up with that, and I got into Jimi Hendrix for about another year, and then I got onto jazz fusion, and that was it for me. Nothing's ever come near to it as far as popular music goes. And then, obviously, when I met the devotees, similar to you, but it was a more of a sudden thing with me. It was like one minute I'm out there, and the next minute I'm in there. So I went to a festival in Italy, in Florence, in 1983, just on my own back.
What was it
I didn't
called?
remember, I can't remember what they called it, but Bhagawan was into holding these big
Oh, okay,
festivals.
yeah, yeah, with Soma Kamaraj and Keshava Bharati Sundarup.
Yeah, loads of the sannyasis all on the stage, doing their thing. So
Just
I
the,
went to that and I met, just a junior, and I met Rohini Nandan,
uh,
and I said, can I join? Because I'm from England, I'm not Italian. And so he said, okay, well, you come back with us then, and you can go to Krum Court and do the Bhakti program. So that's what I did. And I never really looked back. There was, what I'd left was not really anything to lament over.
we all have our
What?
debt to Srila Prabhupada's disciples for bringing us to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's
Especially,
it's unfortunate that we're told you're not welcome if you take inspiration from any other enlightened Gaudiya Vaishnav.
mm,
Not all are like that, but some are like that.
well, that's sectarianism, isn't it?
It's sectarianism and it's also fear because sometimes when people, and I'm not saying this about you, but sometimes when people go to other mats and communities, oh, you got to meet our guru. He's an Uttama Adhikari. There's no Uttama Adhikaris in ISKCON. You have to come to our Sangha. And in this way, you know, then the
Well,
practice.
I was not in that position because I know when Jai Tirtha left, he took a whole load of devotees with him. And when Narayan Maharaj started to come around in the 90s, it took a load of devotees. In my case, I was just me, and
Right.
I wasn't telling anyone to come with me. I would rather they didn't, to be honest. I was quite happy to be.
Why is that? Why is that?
Well, because I knew everybody had prejudices about it. Because, well, what I didn't tell you earlier was that I'd been visiting this Gaudiya Mutt for quite a while before, when I was living in the manor, and I used to get a devotee called Gudakesh who drove a car, and I said, look, come and give me a lift. Give me a lift to this temple. You'll really like it there. There's a Maharaj gives a nice talk there. So that was going on. But then the authorities in the temple got wind of it, and that finished. So that time I was at the manor. And then Shivaram Swami called me into his caravan and said, I want you to be the head pujari at Soho Street. I said, all right. And so I went down to do that. But the thing is, that made it easy for me to get to this Gaudiya Mutt now.
Okay.
I didn't need a lift. I could get on the underground. I was there in 15 minutes. So I was going there quite regularly because there was two sannyasis there. One of them was talking the Hari Katha, and the other one was singing and cooking and doing puja. And it was just such a beautiful atmosphere, just the two of them. And so I would go there a lot and just listen to the Hari Katha. I thought, what could be wrong with this? Why is this wrong? Why is this frowned upon. I could never really get my head around it. I thought, actually, what if it's frowned upon? It's for no good reason. It's for
That's
bad
interesting.
reason.
Yes. Now, was this the Gaudiya Math that was actually established by Ban Mara by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disciples?
Yeah,
Wow!
yeah,
Wow! This is that
mm,
original one, the very first one that was made in the Western world.
yeah. Not the same building.
Right.
This building. The disciple, her name was Vinodvani Dasi.
Sally Botel.
Cecilia, not
But there's
Sally.
another one. There was another one, Sally Botel.
No, it's Cecilia.
Cynthia.
Cecilia.
Cecilia.
Cecilia Bond. Yeah.
Oh, okay. She
Daisy.
she became Vinod Vani.
That's right. Her full name was Daisy Cecilia Bautel.
Okay.
And the other one was Vishnu Priya. And I don't, she didn't stay around too long. But this other one, Vinod Vani, she spent her whole life doing bhajan.
Wow.
And she used to give Harinam to
She
people,
used to give
Bengalis.
Harina.
Yeah, to Bengalis in London.
Did you meet her?
No, she passed away in 1982.
Wow. And if someone would have gone to meet her, they would have been labeled as being in Maya, and kicked out of
Well,
Islam.
I think the devotees, a big group of devotees, when they heard about her in the early 80s, they went to visit her, and she was a bit alarmed. She was an old lady. She didn't know what all these young people were coming with Krishna book and like. I don't think she really wanted to know. She wasn't interested. So automatically they frown upon that. How can they not be interested? What would they give?
Huh.
She's got everything. There's stacks, even to this day, there's stacks and stacks of her personal correspondence with Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha Maharaj throughout the last portion of the 1930s, and then from after the war, from 1945 onwards, her correspondence. She had Srimad Bhagavatam, she had Chaitanya Charitamrita, all in English, and she had all the harmonist magazines.
Wow.
So what a resource that place is.
Yeah.
We had these two big volumes of the complete harmonist, all stuck together into two huge volumes. And so reading those fantastic articles by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada and his other, English editors and stuff, was so inspiring. But like I said, I couldn't maintain it once it had gone down to the normal people being there. Oh, I jumped ahead of myself. So I was going to this temple quite regularly while I was the Soho Street head pujari. I made a deal. It was quite an outrageous deal because all the other pujaris were women, and every month one of them would be down.
Right.
And so being the head pujari, I was having to organize all that stuff. And I called them all in for a meeting, and they nearly bit my head off for saying it. And I said, look, well, seeing as you all get 3 or
Excuse
4 or
me. Excuse
5
me.
days,
They bit your head off for what? Almost.
well, I'll tell you why. I said, because you all seem to get like 5 days off every month,
Yeah.
can I have a day off twice a month? And they were outraged. How could it's not a day off, it's not a hot day. So, but anyway, I managed to get them to agree that on Akadashi Day, Hari's Day, I would go with the Sankirtan devotees, the devotees who are distributing the books and stuff, because they all had a day off on Akadashi, and they would chant and read and do all that sort of stuff all day in this house in South London. So I was supposed to be going there, but I wasn't going there. I was going to the Gaudiya Math and spending the day there. So after a few times doing that, Bhagavat Ashraya, who was the president of the Soho Street Temple, learned about this. Somebody told him, where is Murari? That was my name then. Where is Murari? Oh, I don't know. He's not coming. He's going off to the Gaudiya Math. So I came down to open the temple gates at 4 o'clock, because I was the head pujari. I was doing all that in Soho Street, and the door was locked, and I couldn't find the key,
Uh-oh.
and it was impossible to do. So I thought, damn it, what am I going to do if I can't open up the deities in time for Mangalati? It's going to be a catastrophe. So I asked a devotee called Navadweep, who was a really strong, muscly Jamaican devotee. I asked him to break the door open. So he went and got a crowbar, was just about to start pulling the door off the hinges, and Bhagavat Ashraya came dangling the keys.
Oh,
I said,
wow.
"Oh, you've got them. Oh, you've got them." And I went to grab them, and he went, "Wait a minute. Yeah, where were you yesterday?" That was it. So then,
I was hearing about Krishna. Oh no, you're in big trouble.
no, this was big trouble because Keshava Bharati and Bhagavat Ashraya, through the whole japa period from 5 o'clock till 7 o'clock, interrogated me in the office, right? So Keshava Bharati was sitting down, being like good cop, and Bhagavat Ashraya was walking up and down in front of me, most intimidatingly, asking me all these questions. What am I doing? What's my doing? For 2 hours. And
Wow.
so when the conch blew, and I said, "Well, is that it? Can I go now?" He said, "All right, but we're going to speak to you later on." But the first thing I did was pack my bags and left. That was it. I never want to go back there again.
Wow.
You know?
So tell me from not that I'm trying to promote the other sangha, but from what you were experiencing in ISKCON and what you were going to hear when you went to the Gaudiya Math, what what was it that that attracted you, or what did you find you were experiencing there that you were not getting at Soho?
Well, a much greater degree of authenticity. They knew what they were talking about, basically. Whereas most of the devotees who I was associated with or acquainted with at the Manor or in ISKCON didn't really know what they were talking about or didn't know any more than I. Whereas these
In other
people
words, at the Gaudiya Math, these were older, senior, deeper
were
practitioners.
mature. Yeah, they were mature and they've been practicing already longer, than most other people. And
Uh-huh.
very nice, they had Vaishnava qualities and they spoke about Krishna very nicely and made things clear and easy understandable and imbued you with more eagerness for it. So I remember used to leave there skipping and dancing down the street, thinking that was so cool what I just heard.
Wow.
And then so much reading and reading and reading, just reading and reading all the time, just imbibing the nectar, because otherwise, like a sieve, you can take it all in and just poof, it's all gone. So
Right.
you just got to keep stuffing it in, and some point or other that blockage will get blocked up and you'll keep it. That's my experience.
But
It's
this is
an
what I was.
accumulative effect,
This is what I was.
accumulation.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It's an accumulative effect over time, over decades. That's why, people when they put younger devotees off. Oh, I want to learn Sanskrit. Oh no, that takes too long. Well, all the more reason to start now, isn't it?
I
Start.
started three university clubs near Toronto, and at one of them, University of Toronto, I was giving vegetarian cooking courses for the students as a way to give them prasadam and help accustom them to Krishna culture and philosophy. But the head rabbi, he saw that I was having a really good influence on the Jewish students, and he did not like that. There was a lot of Jewish kids at that campus, so he staged Cult Awareness Week, and to try to uh, denigrate anyone that wasn't Jewish, and he actually invited a godbrother or I don't know if I call him a godbrother or a former godbrother, Jagannath Sutta Das, who had joined the anti-cult movement to come and travel around the world and speak against ISKCON and speak against Prabhupada. And he, although I can't exactly say he spoke against Prabhupada, but his main point was, I used to be in the BTG house in Philadelphia, serving there, and I wanted to learn Sanskrit. But the temple president told me, no, you got to go on Sankirtan. And then he explained Sankirtan is their fundraising. That's how they get their money, by doing something. He didn't mention that it was book distribution. He just said Sankirtan. Of course, we've seen Sankirtan take on many different definitions over the years.
Yeah.
But I thought, when I was looking at that, I was listening to that in a university classroom, I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Yes, I understand. Prabhupada stressed so much how important his book distribution is. But wow, as a result of forcing someone to go on Sankirtan when they want to learn Sanskrit, if the end result is that they become dedicated to denouncing ISKCON, that wasn't a better idea.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, you can understand why you couldn't have everybody just learning Sanskrit.
Right.
But I think those who's going to want to anyway. I think if anyone
Rare.
wants to, yeah, if someone wants to, then they should be encouraged. If they
You're
want to.
reminding me of a story of this one devotee that comes to Mayapur. I guess it was 1975, one of the early Gaur Purnima festivals. And my godbrother Banu Bhattu Prabhu was in charge of engaging everybody to help organize the festival, or to put on the festival. And this one devotee arrived and he said, "Okay, Prabhu, well, we've got a lot of service to be done here." And he said, "Oh, the only service I'm going to be doing is chanting Hare Krishna." And Banu Bhatta got like frustrated by that, and he went and he told Srila Prabhupada, "There's one devotee. I'm trying to engage him in service. There's so much to be done here, and he just wants to chant Hare Krishna. He doesn't want to do any service." The Prabhupada said, "You don't think chanting Hare Krishna is service?" He said, "It's the topmost service, chanting Hare Krishna."
Did he say that? Yeah.
So
Well, that's
very
right.
nice. We want to learn Sanskrit because we need devotees, to help translate. I mean, Gopi Puranadan Prabhu translated the Sri Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Lagu Bhagavatamrita. Uh, we need devotees that are dedicated to Sanskrit. Did you learn it?
No, I'm still learning. I mean, I'm not an academic. I'm just learning for relishing. So,
Okay. I took a course from Satyanarayan Prabhu when he was in Vrindavan in 1980, called Sanskrit for Preachers. This is before he became Babaji, Satyanarayan
right,
Das.
yeah.
And
I find it really boring. If you try to learn Sanskrit and you learn all this grammar, and it's so boring. And the
uh-huh,
same goes for Latin and Greek.
right.
In
I
the
learned Latin
Western.
as a boy. Yeah.
Right, so how boring they make it, whereas it could be, it doesn't have to be so boring. I mean, I've read a lot of educational treatises on teaching Latin to boys a few hundred years ago.
Uh-huh.
And there was an academic called John Locke, and he came up with this idea that you don't really need to spend so much time learning grammatical rules. You just need an interlinear translation of the books, especially Latin, because it's the Roman characters anyway. So by that, it's similar to what Prabhupada did with his word for word. With that word for word, theoretically, you can learn Sanskrit. But an interlinear translation is where you've got the word for word right next to the word in between the lines. You know what I
Okay.
mean? And so if you learn to read it that way, you can pick it up so quickly
Give an
just by
example.
reading.
Give an example, please.
How? Like what? Like what? From Sanskrit?
Yeah, like the simpler system that you're describing.
Well, you can't give a verbal example. You can only show what it would be like. So say you've got the lines of Sanskrit, if you can read the Devanagari, if not just in Romanized, and then flowing just below that in smaller letters, the
Okay.
English meaning and the grammatical form that it's taken.
Has anyone done that?
Well, not with our books. I mean, they've done it with Greek and Latin texts.
That would be great if someone did that.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I think too. I mean, I do it to my own books. I get my own books and just do it.
Uh-huh. There's also the Harinam Vyakarana, right? Where Sanskrit is taught based on Krishna.
Well, it's grammar, you know. It's still boring. It just, instead of using ordinary grammatical terms, he uses Harinam, different names, Krishna. So it makes it more interesting, but it's still grammar.
Okay. That's
Grammar is an obstacle, an impediment to people. People get put off by grammar, but you don't realize you don't really need to learn it because you learn it by reading it. You know, if you, like, say, Krishna, the different forms of the Krishna's name takes according to the grammatical inflection. So, how long does it take you to learn what Krishnasya means? Krishnena, Krishna. It wouldn't take you long if you were reading that a lot and seeing it. Krishnasya means of Krishna. Krishna means from Krishna. So you learn all those grammatical inflections just by reading. And while you're reading, you're also enjoying the subject.
right.
Whereas with grammar, it's just blah, blah, blah. You know? I don't know. I think it's a big obstacle for learning. It's almost like a trick to put you off.
Uh-huh, an obstacle.
Mm, yeah.
It's a great idea. Someone should do what you're saying.
Yeah. Maybe. I mean, we've got centuries ahead to this for this thing to spread and progress, and more writers, and people will write original books. Maybe like a Jiva Dharma. You could write a sort of novel, but full of Krishna tattva in a modern setting. That would be really cool. But just loaded with Krishna tattva.
Yeah, so um, fascinating to hear how you have absorbed the Gaudiya culture and philosophy. And I guess if someone is not under the management of the GBC, then they have that luxury to explore and investigate what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gave us, what Srila Prabhupada gave us, without being told, no, you can't hear from those other teachers. Yet there's quotes by Prabhupada where he said that if my godbrothers say anything different than what I have said, then that could
Well,
create.
I would have thought that we are developed as a society and culture to never accept someone telling you can't read that book. You can't stop people. You can't say you can't ban a book. Or if you do, you make people want to read it.
Right.
I mean, that's how a lot of people got into this because of the warning against it. You thought, oh, that looks interesting. Why do they not want me to read that? It's just a natural human instinct, isn't it?
It is. I've been hearing a lot from Rupanuga Prabhu, one of Srila Prabhupada's very first disciples. He sat at his feet every morning hearing Bhagavatam class from
Is he
1960.
the one that's on your Zoom the other day?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which one is he? Which one is he? What?
Well, he's 82 years old, so you should usually be able to
He
tell.
was the older one. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. And he was, he always reminds us how Prabhupada said, I've given you, everything I had to say. It's in my books. You don't need to read other books. He'll make references to quotes. like that. I mean,
Mm.
Prabhupada in another place said every temple should have a scholar, and that scholar, he could read Plato's Republic. That was given as an example, if it'll help us in our preaching. So there seems to be the very kind of conservative Srila Prabhupada, and then there seems to be an aspect to him that's also liberal and accommodating. And I guess it maybe depends on the kind of person one is. They'll be maybe more attracted to the very I've given you, just these five books. That's all you need: Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, uh, Bhagavad Gita. And then there's others who'll say, but no, but Prabhupada in his own purports in the Chaitanya Charitamrita says,
That's right.
for more information, you read this book by this acharya.
That's right. And now the thing is with that is you probably will have, before you get to that passage in Chaitanya Charitamrita where Prabhupada says that, you most likely will have read all his other books.
Right.
You know, so you would have read the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, however many times, and then you read in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and then Prabhupada starts to introduce other titles, and books.
Ujjvala Nilamani, Vidagdha Madhava, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think time, place, and circumstances, I can understand why he was discouraging people to read other books. They haven't even imbibed what he's saying yet.
Right.
First imbibe what he's got to say. And then if you're interested in to find out what other people say, that's all right. But it's if they just ignore or disrespect what he's saying, and that's what they call like overtopping, isn't it? Overstepping.
Right. Jumping over.
Yeah, yeah.
And Rupanuga was also quoting how Srila Prabhupada made a statement, I think, that after 1936, translation of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's writings were not accurate or could not be trusted, or, I mean, I don't know if you have some understanding on that point.
Well, I don't know what was translated after that, really. I mean, there's some books, Professor Sanyal wrote books, and some other Prabhupada Scott brothers wrote some interesting books, OBL4.
Uh-huh.
But prior to that, Bhaktisiddhanta was the editor of the Harmonist, and so most of the articles in there were contributed by his disciples. Even the articles that many people assume are Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's writings are actually, Professor Sanyal or someone else like that, and he approved them. It's hard to say. I don't think you can be exact in every matter. There's grey areas. As is evident. 1 minute Prabhupada said you shouldn't read other books, and the next minute he's recommending to read other books. So you don't want to think Prabhupada is being capricious, do you? So
No.
why is he saying two different things? Obviously, it's for time, place, and circumstance, and more importantly, persons. Who is he talking to when he says these things? That's often not taken into consideration. And imagine the stress he must have been under anyway, Srila Prabhupada. I just can't imagine how he managed it. All these crazy Westerners coming around and not understanding what he's talking about, most of them, or taking a while, totally novices, green to it all. It must have been imagine doing what he did.
No wonder he had to wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning to translate, because, after Mangalarti, that's when ISKCON was exploding.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. The fact that he came over with you would see from those songs he wrote, those Bengali songs he wrote, that his thing was Srimad Bhagavatam. How can I get this Srimad Bhagavatam out there? How are these people going to be able to read this? This is it. The Srimad Bhagavatam that he wants to turn people onto, right?
Going back to your point about time, place, and circumstance, what I've also observed over the years is I can see how, although certainly that applies, Kala, Patra, Desha, time, place, and circumstance, that could also be skewered to bring in concepts that to basically rationalize or justify anything. Well, time, place, and circumstance, Prabhu.
Yeah, that's right. It can be. So I suppose a person has to be somewhat discerning about that, not just, like blanket everything is time, place, and circumstance. But things that are said, say, in letters or in private conversations, you can probably um, categorize them as belonging more to the time, place, and circumstance than something that's published in a book. Wouldn't you say?
Sorry,
And what,
sorry, things got a little blurry there when you were speaking. Can you repeat that again?
yeah, okay. I was just saying things that are spoken in private letters or in conversations could probably be taken more in reference to time, place, and circumstance
Oh yeah,
than
yes,
things that are in the books.
of course.
And I think if you look at that, if you compare all Prabhupada's warnings and his admonitions regarding those things, are more likely to be in his private conversations and letters. Whereas when he says he recommends this book, he recommends that, he wants his devotees to do this and do that, that's all in his books. So you could say, well, that's not necessary, that's for all time,
Right.
for all persons and in all places. But it's a people have to learn how to be what's the word? They have to exercise judgment, or discretion a little bit. It's not all just this or that. It has to be this or that. There may be
Discretion is the
room.
better part of valor, Prabhupada would say.
Yeah, exactly. There may be room also for disagreement on some elements of theology without falling out. Because after all, it's very subjective, our relationship with Krishna. So we're not all clones. In Krishna's pastimes, his associates, they're not all just clones. They've all got their individuality, haven't they?
Correct. I'm just was wondering why you think Sally Botal was not amazed. Oh wow, Western Vaishnavas. You gave me the impression that she was kind of standoffish. Would you think it was
It was
because of
better.
sorry?
I think it was due to her age. She was an old lady by then, and a group of 20 or so young Hare Krishnas at her door, I think maybe alarmed her. But I don't know what those devotees themselves say, but they were discouraged by her response anyway. I don't really know any more about it than that. But
Uh-huh.
I could imagine from her point of view, um, it would be like them coming to teach their granny how to suck eggs. Do you understand that?
Teaching their granny how to
Suck eggs.
suck eggs.
You know, don't you know that expression?
No, I don't. I've never heard it.
Okay. Well, it's an English expression or Scottish. It's when a young child is trying to teach their grandmother something.
Right.
The grandmother that has been, and they use the term suck eggs because
Okay.
sucking eggs is what weasels do. If I don't eat eggs, but if you eat eggs, if you want to eat a raw egg, you poke a hole in the bottom of the egg and you
Oh,
suck it out.
oh,
So it's a young person trying to educate an elder person is like trying to teach your grandmother how to suck eggs. She already
okay.
knows.
Yeah, yeah.
So it would have probably been a bit like
Being
that.
presumptuous, basically.
Yeah, yeah. But then again, I wasn't there and I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I've always wondered how to resolve this. I mean, it's not for me to resolve, but surely there's much to be learned from those who have served in Gaudiya Math for decades, eons. But at the same time, when like one godbrother said to me when I was expressing some interest to meet a Gaudiya acharya, he said, well, there's a lot of, I know this acharya, he's been very affectionate to me. There's pros and cons, but when you consider how much money has been lost and you consider how many people, how many devotees have been lost going to his sangha, then probably the cons outweigh the pros. That was his calculation. I mean, I imagine if I was the temple president and some devotees find someone from another sangha to be very enthusing and enlightening, and they start preaching to all my congregation, oh, you should come to this other guru's. I mean, I guess there's a way to do it in which, like, you wouldn't ask everyone to go and do that at the same time that ISKCON is having a Sunday feast. Yeah, I mean, it's delicate. But if you're like a Kanishta Adhikari and you don't have much sense of etiquette and respect, you could be over the top and you could create a lot of divisiveness and
Well, there is probably no solution to it, really.
uh-huh.
It's just one of those things that's going to go on, and hopefully we'll all learn to appreciate each other as the generations go by. How do you solve that one? You can't really, can you? If somebody comes along and's charismatic and they're attractive and devotees want to go and listen to Hari Katha from them, it might upset your program, but what can you do?
Right.
Will you hold them back because you want to maintain um, the income of your thing? All these things are justifiable from different points of view.
Right.
I don't know how to resolve it. I think we'll probably be falling out and stuff for decades to come.
One godbrother told me when I went to Vrindavan a few years ago, he said he was Prabhupada's chauffeur. He was Indian body. He was kind of short. I wish I could remember his name. But he said he was Prabhupada's chauffeur in Vrindavan. And as he was driving by the Krishna Balaram temple with Prabhupada, Prabhupada said to him, the war is over. He said he said the Gaudiya Math and ISKCON must come together as an alliance to spread Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy through the world. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of it. And how to do that? When I meditate on that, it's almost as bewildering as Srila Prabhupada saying, your love for me will be shown how you cooperate with one another to keep this institution together after I am gone. And I'm thinking, wow, cooperation is a huge topic. I mean, who really understands how to cooperate? From the top-heavy side, cooperation means I'm the my way or the highway Swami. I'm senior to you. I've been a devotee so much longer than you. You shouldn't even question anything I say or that I do because I'm quite absolute. I've got my GBC hat on. I got my sannyasi resident hat on. I got initiating guru hat on. I'm wearing all the hats here. I don't need to consult with you. But if you read books on community development, say by uh, Christian Leaf, I think is her name, she talks about sociocracy. She talks about uh, uh, consensus, community by consensus. I mean, there are examples where if you acknowledge this one person as being the guru and totally absolute in every way, if you agree to that, then I guess you can get along with everybody else that agrees with that. But if you've been a Swami in India for 17 years, and if you say to the young Bengali boys, brahmacharis, jump, they will say Jai Maharaj. But if you come back to North America and you say to your godbrothers, jump, they'll probably say, why Maharaj? One will say Jai Maharaj, the other will say, why Maharaj? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. You
So,
frozen. Oh, yeah.
sorry.
I thought you frozen, but I think you just was
Oh,
standing up for religion.
okay. Yeah, so cooperation is a two-way street. I
Mm,
mean, we cooperated with Prabhupada because we were totally sure that he loved us.
mm,
He would cook for us. He'd give us personal letters, how to take care of our health.
mm,
I mean, there was no doubt in our mind.
mm.
I don't think anybody can take for granted that they're on the level of Prabhupada or act as if they are when they haven't even gained the trust, or you know what I'm trying to express? I don't know if I'm articulating myself very well.
No, I get you. I mean, it's a mockery to try and imitate Prabhupada. That's what used to really get on my nerves with when they used to give lectures. Some of the acharyas, they would imitate his mannerisms or imitate his pronunciation of certain words. And to me, that's just mockery, really. It's just not serving any good purpose. But they're immature. Prabhupada came and who knows? He probably didn't even know what was going to happen when he came to America. Last thing I imagine he was expecting was all these devotees to suddenly be made, in the way that they were so enthusiastic because of his chanting. And it was probably all as big as much of a surprise to him as it was to anyone else.
Right.
And how long did he have? 10 years to
12 years.
right? It's not very long when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. And human nature doesn't change, so people are always going to be falling out. They want to fall out over something. It's not even if everything's perfect, the people will still want to fall out because that's human nature, isn't it? It's human nature. We like something, we dislike this, we like our likes and dislikes. I mean, I don't know how far we've risen above the opposites, our attachment to opposites.
Of course, it depends on what modes we're situated in. If we're situated in the mode of goodness, then we may consider what we have to learn from another. Whereas if we're in the mode of passion, it's more about what I know. And if we're in the mode of ignorance, it's like, well, I don't really know that much, but I'm going to prove to everybody that you're not worthy of knowing.
Well, anyway, I suppose time is getting on. I'll
Yes,
have to
sir. It was
retire.
wonderful. I look forward to another time with you, but if we want to focus on you, then don't ask about me.
Well, I'm the same. I don't like to talk about me so much.
Okay, well, we'll give and take then. It was
Okay.
wonderful knowing you more, and I want to know you even more than I do.
Yeah. Likewise.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Likewise.
Please accept
All
my
right.
respectful obeisances. Vanchikalpa, Trivyacha, Evacha, Tikarang, Bhavnidyo, Madan Mohan Prabhu Namo Namaha. To
Do
be
I go to dust?
to, to be
Go to dust. You know what? I don't like it when people say Prabhu. I'd rather be Madan Mohan Das.
Jai Madan Mohan Das.
Because I feel Prabhu like, oh, that's someone else.
Yes,
Das.
yes, that's a whole topic in itself, being called Prabhu.
Yeah.
Because even the ladies will get into, well, Prabhupada called a few of the early ladies Prabhu. Then another God sister said, well, I should never want to be called Prabhu. I don't want to be called, not just because Prabhu is a masculine term, but why would anyone want to be called Prabhu, like you're expressing right now?
Yeah. Well, it's Lord, isn't it? Lord Master.
Yes.
I mean, people don't often think about what the meaning of what they say.
I hope you've realized I've become your Lord.
Yeah. Do you realize you're calling me Master? Lord. Oh, like, hurry up, Prabhu. Get out the shower, Prabhu. Come on, Prabhu.
Come on, my Lord.
Anyway, on that humorous note, we'll
Yes,
get to
sir.
right?
Yeah,
I'll
that
let
was
you talk
wonderful.
after you're the expert.
Thank you so much. I'm glad Krishna arranged for me to finally connect with you, and I look forward to part two. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Right.